The following is a class taken from my online course Cheat Code, the Ultimate Wedding Videographer Masterclass. Stick around until the end to find out more. So now on to the first multicam event of the wedding day, the ceremony. Once again, there are a few things I'd like to know from the bride and groom in advance. Firstly, will there be any readings, and if so, who will be giving them? I like to mock up anyone that's giving a reading, so it's handy to know ahead of time how many people I will need to track down. The other thing I want to know is, are the couple going to do any personal vows? And if they're not, I try and persuade them to do so. Having some heartfelt personalised words spoken to each other during the ceremony is not only a great moment for the couple, but it guarantees you some fantastic audio content for the film. And quite often I use the vows as the backbone of my highlight films, so I'm always trying to encourage my couples to do it. So now into the shooting. I'm going to break down a few options for covering the ceremony based on the amount of gear you have, but initially I will talk you through my ideal scenario. Let's start first of all with the civil ceremony. And the first thing I like to do when I get there is to get my audio recording. And in order of the highest priority, I want to get a mic on the groom, which will also capture the bride's vows, a mic on anyone giving a reading, and a mic on the registrar. Also a backup mic which is close to the couple and the registrar if anything goes wrong. Often it's left on the table or in some flowers that are nearby. If there's any musicians, I want a mic on them as well. I have 6 mics on me at all times, and this is usually enough to cover most scenarios. The registrar is usually still in the interview with the bride at this point when I first get there, and she can't be mic'd up yet. So once the groom and readers and backup mics are in position, I get my cameras set up. The ideal layout for my cameras is to firstly have my C-cam with a 70-180 lens at the back shooting straight down the aisle. This will give me a groom reaction shot as the bride enters, and it's also a nice clean shot for the vows. If the bride is entering directly from the back of the room, I'll have this angle set off to one side but still pointing at the groom. Then at some point during the ceremony, I'll aim to get to the back and reposition it in the middle. In the past, I've even asked a photographer to do this for me when it's not been possible for me to get back there. So if you prep them beforehand, most times they're happy to do that for you. My top tip is to set this camera quite low, so then you can ask the photographer to shoot over the top of it rather than walk in front of it if they need to get that shot down the aisle. I have this camera set to manual focus at around f4, which is a pretty safe aperture to keep everything in focus. If the light in this room is constantly changing, I'll set it to auto ISO and use the exposure compensation dial to dial in exactly where I want the exposure to stay. I'll go into a little bit further detail about this in the exposure lesson. My B cam I like to have set up at the front, and this will go on the side facing the groom. I use my 24-70 lens and initially set it as a 24mm safety wide angle, and again set it to manual focus at about f4. If possible during the vows though, I want to get around to this angle and zoom it in to about 55mm so it's a nice tight shot of the groom and it mirrors my A cam. My A cam will be the one I'll be holding, usually with a 55mm lens, or if there's not much space, a 35mm with the aperture at f2. I'll be using this as handheld as normal. When the bride walks in, I'll be capturing with autofocus, but when she comes into place at the front, I will then move over to the side and lock this camera down on my monopod or my tripod, depending on the space I use one of those two. I'm looking at this point to get a nice mid shot of the bride, with the groom in the foreground. Going back to pre-ceremony though, as soon as the registrar does arrive, I like to introduce myself with a big smile and hopefully charm them into letting me mic them up. I found just being super polite and calling them by their first name can go a long way. I also like to suggest the best place for them to direct anyone that's going to give a reading to stand. Most of the time they will happily position them wherever works best for you. The other thing I like to ask is if I can please be at the top of the aisle, shooting down the middle as the bride makes her entrance. Obviously I don't just come crashing in with these demands, the ceremony is very much their show, but a gentle and polite request usually works. So to round up, the things I'm asking from the registrar are: can I please put a mic on you? Could you please ask the people giving a reading to stand in this certain spot? And is it okay for me to stand in the middle, just as the bride comes down the aisle? And that's my ideal setup for 3 cameras, but what if you don't have that many? Well, my 2 camera variant isn't massively different. I would operate exactly the same with my A cam up at the front, but for my B cam, I would have that in the aisle shooting down from the back with a 24-70, so I can choose to have that either as a wide or a tight shot, depending on the space. Again, this camera would be set manual focus at f4. If you only have one camera, then do the same setup, but instead of the camera at the back, try and have that as your phone set up on a light stand, just to give you almost like a safety shot of the whole ceremony. You just need something to cut to if you move your A-cam at the front. And if you are short on audio devices, for civil ceremony I would first prioritise the groom, as it is possible to get both the bride's and registrar's audio from his mic. The second most important would then be any readings, as they are likely to be family or friends, and I'm sure the bride and groom would rather have their audio than a random registrar's. Now let's go into a church ceremony, and church ceremonies are a little bit more restrictive and my setup changes slightly. I've heard stories of people having some strong kickback from vicars, not letting the videographer mic them up and then maybe making them shoot from a single spot at the back. I have been lucky not to experience any of that, but I think it's very important before you do any setup to go and speak to the vicar initially and find out how they like to operate, not going in and demanding things right away, but listening about how they want it to go. I then ask if they're happy for me to put a mic on them, and if there are any readings taking place, where will they be happening? They usually just want reassuring that you'll be as discreet as possible during the ceremony, and I always make sure to emphasise that I will be, but I just request that I can be at the front just to shoot the bride coming down the aisle. Then when she's in place next to the groom, I'll make my way to the back and I'll shoot the entire ceremony from the back. Once again, before my cameras get set up, I want my audio rolling. I put one on the vicar, one on the groom, and one attached to the lectern where their readings are taking place. With church weddings, readings usually do always take place from the same designated spot, so rather than mic each reader, I'll just position one mic there, and I'll also use this as my sound source during the hymns. Camera setup does depend on the size of the church, but ideally I want my B-cam to be left on the tripod at the front at 24mm, facing towards the bride and the groom to capture them and the faces of the guests behind them. I have this set to manual focus at f4. I will then have my C-cam with a 70-180 at the back shooting down the aisle to get a nice tight shot of the groom's reaction, again manual focus at f4. Similar to the civil ceremony, I'll be up the front as the bride enters, hand holding my A-cam with either a 35 or 55mm lens at f2. I like to use the autofocus to rack focus from the groom to the bride as she comes down the aisle. Then once she's in place at the top of the aisle, I move to the back and put my A-cam on a tripod next to the C-cam. And this is where I'll shoot the rest of the ceremony. My A-cam will be a wide shot of either 35mm or that 55mm. And I have the C-cam set at 180mm to capture a tighter shot. I'll pan this over to capture the readings when they happen as well. For a 2-camera setup, I would have the B-cam at the back down the aisle on the longest lens you own and work in the same way. Capture the bride as she comes down with the A-cam and then move to the back to have a tight shot and a wide shot down the aisle. If you have minimal recording devices, priority of audio would first be the groom, because his audio would also capture the vicar and the bride. And the second priority should be to have the mic on the lectern to capture the readings, and this can also capture backup ambient, which is great to cut to during the hymns.
And can we shoot into it?
This is me. My name is Rue, and I have the best job in the world. I spend my days at wild parties capturing the best day of people's lives, and then creating something that will be treasured forever. I want to show you how you can do the same. My online course, Cheat Code, will teach you how to book weddings, film weddings, and edit weddings. Over 15 hours of content broken down into bite-sized, no-nonsense lessons, real-world examples, behind-the-scenes footage, camera setups, structures and templates that you can follow to skip years of trial and error. No questions left unanswered. This course will give you all the knowledge and insight you need to start creating stunning wedding films and build a business you're proud of. Grab it now for 50% off.